I remember in grade 2, I wore an Indian suit for picture day. It was a beautiful pastel green with silver embroidery, and it was brand new, so you can only imagine my excitement. The downside was that my mom didn't want me wearing it. You know, kids ruin everything, and she's like, this is for your cousin's wedding, let's not do that today. But at the same time, she was so excited that her Canadian-born Indian child wanted to wear a suit. So she ironed it, I put it on, she did 2 braids in my hair, and sent me right off to school. You know, when you're that young and at that age, you're quite oblivious to everything around you. But that was the first time I realized something. Walking my usual route to school, I realized that I was getting stared at. And it wasn't that, oh, she's so cool, you know, I'm gonna look at her because her outfit's like amazing. It was more so judging kind of stare. So once I got to school, I found my friends. And while I was standing there, I realized kids were still staring. Some were whispering. I had pointing going on and, you know, giggles. And I wondered, what in the heck is up today? Like, why is everyone laughing and staring at me? And, you know, at that age, we're quite blunt. So I had a friend straightforward, stared at me and was like, you're wearing Indian clothing. That's weird. People don't think that's normal here. I had never felt so embarrassed. So I thought, why don't I just run home, you know, get changed into normal clothing, a t-shirt and jeans, and I'll be back in time. But, you know, the bell rang, class started, and I was stuck. I had never felt so ashamed of myself and my culture. And that was the one day of many where I felt so self-conscious and just did not want to be there. All because some kids were pointing and laughing at something that I thought was so cool and so unique, but others didn't seem to see that. Now, that was the first time I really realized that I was different. Yes, I had long, thick black hair that was always done up in braids. I wore clothing that was not necessarily cool or trendy, and it slightly smelt of curry, being that I lived in an Indian family. We ate, you know, Indian food. And of course, sometimes it seeps into your clothes just like any other food. But I was picked on for it. That wasn't the first time I was picked on. People picked on the way I dressed, the way I smelled, the way my hair was done, the earrings I wore, and specifically the way I talked. Now, being raised by 2 immigrant parents, English was not the first language I learned. I learned Punjabi. People assumed that if you can't speak English right away, you clearly aren't born and raised here. Or I was undeserving of being here. I got called so many racial slurs and was made fun of for being in ESL. At such a young age, I just wanted to fit in. So I wanted to look like the people that I went to school with. I wanted to look like the people on TV. You know, fair skin, blue or green eyes, blonde hair. That's all I ever saw. So why would I want to be something different? Why would I want to be someone that had tanned brown skin, black hair, and big bushy eyebrows and, you know, a mustache? We all go through that. As I got older, that transition from elementary school to middle school and then to high school, I realized that we were becoming a little bit more accepting. There were days such as Multicultural Day where we wore traditional clothing, shared traditional food, and in some cases told traditional stories. Now I thought, this is a huge breakthrough. We're becoming more accepting. It was one day out of 365 days a year where we pretended to give a shit about each other. Pardon my language. Now, this one day, although it is great, doesn't make up for all the other days. You know, for the days where myself, my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents had been criticized for their culture and their beliefs. The reason I'm talking about this is to bring up a topic that there's been a lot of controversy over. And I want to tell my story. Instead of hearing people of the dominant culture constantly telling the story for me. You know, Multicultural Day was awesome. We got to come together and share our stories and share our cultures, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm not going to say sharing a culture shouldn't be allowed and, you know, is a bad thing. It really isn't. But there is this difference between, you know, sharing your cultures with others and having people be respectful and understanding. Nowadays, we see this controversy over culture appropriation and culture appreciation, and, you know, people banter back and forth about what it is and why it's important or why it's not important. And that's why I want to put my story out there. A person of color, a person of a minority group that has, you know, faced these issues all throughout her life. And I want to bring forth the experiences I've had and really get others to understand what exactly it is and how it affects people. I am all about sharing cultures and, you know, getting to know other cultures, being respecting of them, understanding them, you know, getting to know the history and educating yourself. That being said, there have been various instances where I see my culture being appropriated online. Over the years, we have experienced cultures being appropriated, and we tend to call it out now. You know, we aren't just stepping back and allowing it to happen, which a lot of people say is not right, that culture appropriation is just something that we pulled out of thin air and, you know, is something just to complain about. Although those arguments have been made, the reason being that people are calling this out is that we finally have the chance to do so. There are people of minority groups who finally have the courage and feel empowered to address controversial topics. Individuals of the dominant group have spoken on everyone's behalf, and that's no longer the case. People are speaking up for themselves, hence why we are now calling out when something that is meaningful and, you know, respected in our culture is taken out of context and used as something, you know, trendy or fashionable. There are so many times where I've seen the traditional bindi, Indian clothing, all being used as something that's supposed to be supporting a trend, something that's exotic and fun for people of the dominant culture to wear. Particularly, you see a lot of individuals wearing bindis and henna tattoos to stuff such as music festivals, I would say like Coachella and V-Fest and all those. And they use it as something funky, you know. Here's the cool look, I put on a bindi. For the most part, this is done without having any knowledge or knowing the prior history to why these things are important and how they are significant in our cultures. I get it. Henna tattoos are beautiful. Bindis I love. I wish I could wear one every day. But there is some significance behind what they are. And it's not okay to just wear it as a trend. Individuals such as myself, my parents, my siblings, grandparents, we've all been ridiculed and criticized for how we dress, what we eat, and the language we speak. So someone who's of the dominant culture, who comes around and takes certain aspects of my culture to use as a trend, to commodify, it's not appreciated, and really it's not fair. Those who are of that dominant culture and predominantly white are for the most part able to take whatever they please. This borrowing or taking, even claiming of other cultures is in itself a privilege that is offered to those who are white. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the term white privilege. That has also been bounced around alongside the term culture appropriation. Now, once again, this is very controversial. A lot of people don't appreciate when this gets, you know, picked on. And that's the amusing part. When it's called white privilege, those who are more so offended are those who are white. And you hear all sorts of things like, it's not our fault, and I'm not racist, and I don't have a privilege. And that's the thing, no one really notices that they have that privilege. It's those that are on the outside, the minorities, that see this privilege being offered to others, that see that the structure and the societies we live in are catered towards those who are white. And personally, I've progressed over the years and slowly realized that this is a thing. Now, I'm not saying those of the dominant cultures are the ones that, are constantly appropriating other cultures and are the only ones doing so. It's people of minorities that do it too. I mean, I personally have done it, especially when I was younger, where there was really no talk about what culture appropriation was. There was no talk about other ethnicities and races. Instead, I, wore cornrows. I had very controversial and inappropriate Halloween costumes, and I didn't think twice about it. We weren't really told, and it wasn't addressed in school, that hey, there's people of other cultures and it's all right, we're different. Now, I know it can be uncomfortable, and trust me, I know what uncomfortable feels like, especially right now. Standing or sitting in front of a camera and telling part of my story is not easy, and I do really encourage it though. I mean, it lets you think about what's happened in your life and why it's happening in your life. There have been so many times where I've brought up culture appropriation and white privilege and the discrimination against, minorities. And people stare at me like, what are you talking about? And it shocks me that there are billions of people in this world, and very few acknowledge the fact that there is something like this that really needs to be addressed. And the biggest part here is telling your story, understanding why it happened and why it's still happening. And then even calling yourself out on times you've done something that really wasn't right. That's the first step. When you call yourself out is when you realize, hey, this isn't, okay. This is not cool. Making fun of other cultures or stripping them of their significance is in no way just. I hope this was in any way helpful. And I really, really hope that other people will, go ahead and post their own story. And, comment below if you, post your own story or want to even, type it up. You don't have to, do a video. But just type it up. Post something in the comments, and I'll definitely be reading it. I will respond to it. This is all part of a learning process. You disagree with things, and you agree with things. And that's how you learn. You have to, listen to others, absorb what they're saying, and be very critical of it. That's just how it is. So if there is anything that needs to be further discussed, please let me know, and I will be happy to follow through. I just want to say thank you for listening in, and maybe in the future, if any of you are interested, I'll be posting some more, expanding on my story, so please keep tuned. Bye.